As Lily stepped into the grand church for her grandmother's funeral, her heart raced with the weight of what she knew. The perfect image of their wealthy family was about to shatter. Everyone was watching. Family friends, business associates, the elite of the city, all believing they were witnessing just another somber farewell. But as Lily stood before the congregation, trembling with the truth of what really happened that night, she knew her next words would send shockwaves through their prestigious world. What she was about to reveal would expose far more than anyone could imagine. What her grandmother had to endure all those years, and the darkness lurking behind their picture-perfect facade. Before we dive into this shocking story that will make you question who you can really trust, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe. The morning sun cast a golden glow through the tinted windows of Marcus Caldwell's luxurious sedan, creating dancing patterns on the solemn face of 13-year-old Lily. She sat in the back seat, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, her small frame dwarfed by the spacious interior. Beside her, Camilla, Lily's stepmother, sat poised and impeccably dressed in mourning black, her posture rigid and her gaze fixed straight ahead. The car glided smoothly along the quiet streets, the silence inside broken only by the soft hum of the engine. Lily's mind wandered, replaying memories of her grandmother Eleanor, her warm smile, the comforting scent of her perfume, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. The weight of loss pressed heavily on Lily's young shoulders, and she found herself drifting off, her head nodding slightly as sleep threatened to overtake her. "Lily!" Camilla's voice, sharp yet composed, cut through the silence like a knife. "We're almost at the church. Sit up straight, darling. You nodded off earlier." Lily blinked awake, her heart racing slightly at the sudden intrusion. She straightened her posture, wincing slightly as her muscles protested, and adjusted her black dress. "Yes, Mother," she whispered, her voice barely audible. From the front seat, Marcus turned slightly, holding Eleanor's framed photograph close to his chest. His eyes, red-rimmed and puffy from grief, softened as he looked at his daughter. "Are you all right, sweetheart? You seem pale and tired," he said, his voice laced with genuine concern. Lily nodded, forcing a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I just didn't sleep well last night," she admitted softly. "I kept thinking about grandmother." Marcus's expression shifted to one of understanding and shared pain. "We're all grieving, Lily," he said gently. "After today, you can rest. You'll take a week off school if you need it." As Marcus turned back to face the road, Camilla reached out to brush Lily's arm in what appeared to be a comforting gesture. But as her fingers grazed Lily's skin, they pressed down on a tender spot, the same place where Camilla had grabbed her forcefully the night before. Lily felt a chill run through her body, the pressure of Camilla's thumb a silent reminder of the secrets that lay beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect family. The car navigated the silent streets of their affluent neighborhood, and Lily's gaze fixed on the approaching church. The aged stone building, with its towering spire, stood firm against the clear morning sky. Today, these stones would witness another solemn gathering, the funeral of Eleanor Caldwell, the revered matriarch of the Caldwell family, a woman whose influence reached far beyond their circles. For Lily, this marked her final chance to bid farewell to her cherished grandmother. The sedan pulled up to the front of the church, where a somber crowd dressed in black waited silently. The tolling of the bells resonated through the air, a mournful sound that seemed to echo the heaviness in Lily's heart. Thompson, the family's longtime driver, stepped out and opened the door for Marcus, who emerged clutching Eleanor's photograph like a talisman against the tide of grief. Camilla exited next, her movements graceful and measured. She cast a critical glance at the assembled mourners, her eyes sweeping over them as if ensuring all attention was focused where it should be, on her, the grieving daughter-in-law. Lily followed hesitantly, feeling small and insignificant next to her imposing stepmother. As they approached the church entrance, Lily couldn't help but notice the whispers and sympathetic glances directed her way. She kept her eyes lowered, focusing on the rhythmic click of Camilla's heels against the pavement, each step bringing them closer to the reality of saying goodbye to Eleanor. The heavy wooden doors of the church creaked open, revealing an interior bathed in soft, filtered light. The scent of white lilies, roses, and tuberoses filled the air, mingling with the low hum of whispered conversations. Lily's eyes adjusted to the dimness, taking in the polished pews that reflected the light filtering through stained glass windows. Marcus led the way down the center aisle, his steps slow and deliberate. Lily followed, her hand brushing against the smooth wood of the pews as she passed. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, a mixture of pity and curiosity that made her skin prickle uncomfortably. As they approached the front of the church, Lily's gaze fell upon the casket. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, polished wood gleaming softly in the muted light, but it was what lay within that made Lily's breath catch in her throat. Eleanor's face, framed by the delicate satin lining, wore a peaceful expression that contrasted sharply with the ache in Lily's chest. Marcus stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he reverently placed the framed photograph of Eleanor next to the casket. The image captured Eleanor in happier times, her smile radiant, her eyes twinkling with the wisdom and kindness that had always been her hallmark. Lily stood there, rooted to the spot, her eyes fixed on her grandmother's face. She wanted to reach out, to touch Eleanor's hand one last time, but fear and protocol held her back. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, silently promising her grandmother that she would be brave, that she would remember all the lessons Eleanor had taught her. As the family took their seats in the front pew, Lily found herself sandwiched between Marcus and Camilla. The closeness to her stepmother made her skin crawl, but she forced herself to sit still, to maintain the facade of the grieving yet composed granddaughter that everyone expected her to be. The priest approached, his robes rustling softly as he moved to stand before the congregation. As he began to speak, his words of comfort washing over the assembled mourners, Lily's mind drifted. She thought of all the times Eleanor had been there for her, after her mother's passing, during sleepless nights, through moments of joy and sorrow. And now, as she sat in this church preparing to say goodbye, Lily felt more alone than ever before. The church fell into a hushed silence as Marcus rose from his seat and made his way to the podium. His steps were heavy, each one seeming to require great effort. As he turned to face the congregation, Lily could see the pain etched deeply into every line of his face. Marcus cleared his throat, his hands gripping the edges of the podium as if to steady himself. When he spoke, his voice trembled with emotion. "Eleanor Caldwell was more than just my mother," he began. "She was the heart of our family, a beacon of our community. Throughout her years, she had spoken of love, wisdom, and strength that guided us through both stormy and calm seas." As Marcus continued, sharing heartfelt stories of Eleanor's unwavering love and support, Lily found herself transported back in time. She remembered the smell of freshly baked cookies in Eleanor's kitchen, the sound of her grandmother's laughter as they played chess on rainy afternoons, and the feeling of safety and warmth in Eleanor's embrace after a nightmare. The crowd listened intently, many wiping away tears as Marcus painted a vivid picture of a woman who had touched so many lives. Lily glanced around, seeing the impact of her grandmother's life reflected in the faces of friends, family, and even acquaintances who had come to pay their respects. The moment was shattered as Camilla rose gracefully from her seat, making her way to the podium with measured steps. Lily watched her stepmother's face carefully, noting the way Camilla's expression shifted, a mask of grief sliding into place with practiced ease. Camilla's voice, when she spoke, was carefully modulated, each word seemingly chosen for maximum effect. "Eleanor welcomed me into this family with open arms," she began, her tone laced with what sounded like genuine emotion. "She was not just a mother-in-law, but a true friend, a confidant, and a source of strength." Lily found herself catching the false notes, the rehearsed expressions, the emptiness behind the words. The congregation, however, seemed moved by her words. Lily could hear sniffles and nodding heads as her stepmother wove a tale of shared moments and deep bonds. It was all Lily could do to keep from standing up and shouting the truth, to expose the lies that Camilla was spreading even here, in this sacred space. When it was time for her turn to give a speech, Lily felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see her father nodding encouragingly. With shaky legs, Lily stood and made her way to the podium. The room seemed to swell around her, a sea of faces both familiar and unfamiliar watching intently. A sudden wave of panic rose in her chest, tightening her throat and making her palms slick with sweat. Her eyes flicked to Camilla, who sat ramrod straight, a barely concealed smirk in her expression, her eyes glinting with a cold intensity that felt like claws digging into her. Camilla's cold warning from the night before echoed in her mind. If you say a word, you'll lose more than your grandmother. A shiver ran down Lily's spine and she faltered for a moment, the words catching in her throat. Lily shifted her gaze from her stepmother to Eleanor's serene face in the casket. Tears blurred her vision as she began to speak, her voice breaking with emotion. "Grandmother was everything to me," she started, her words halting but heartfelt. "After Mom died, she was there, telling me stories of courage and kindness, teaching me how to be strong." Lily felt warmth spread through her chest, making it feel as if Eleanor was there, giving her the strength to continue. She glanced at Camilla again, noting the calculating expression in her eyes and the slight shake of her head, a silent warning. At that moment, Lily made her decision. Her heart pounded, the weight of what she knew pressing on her like a physical burden. "And I want to be strong now for my grandmother." Before doubt could creep in, she said, "It wasn't just her illness that took her," Lily declared, her voice cutting through the silence. She raised a trembling finger at Camilla. "It was her." Faces turned up toward her, surprise and confusion etched on their features. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Marcus's stunned gaze shifted between his daughter and his wife. Disbelief etched across his features. Murmurs began to rise, a tide of whispers and shocked exclamations. For a moment, Camilla's carefully constructed mask slipped. Her eyes hardened, a flash of something cold and dangerous crossing her face before she schooled her expression back into one of shocked innocence. She stood up smoothly, moving towards Lily with arms outstretched. "This isn't the time, Lily," Camilla said, her voice dripping with false concern. She embraced Lily, the gesture appearing comforting to onlookers, but feeling suffocating to the young girl. "You're grieving, sweetheart. We all are." Marcus, visibly shaken, stepped forward. "What do you mean, Lily?" he asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and alarm. Lily opened her mouth to respond, to let the truth pour out, but found herself stuttering. The enormity of what she was doing, the potential consequences, suddenly hit her full force. She felt unprepared, her words failing her at this crucial moment. Before Lily could gather her thoughts, Camilla interjected smoothly. "She's just overwhelmed, Marcus," she said, her tone soothing yet firm. "It's been hard on all of us, but especially on Lily. She was so close to Eleanor." Camilla guided Lily to the side of the church, where Benson, the family's longtime butler, stood watching the proceedings with a grave expression. As they moved, Camilla leaned in close to Lily's ear, her grip on the girl's arm tightening painfully. "Don't you dare stand up against me," Camilla hissed, her words barely audible but filled with menace. She released Lily, leaving her with Benson, and returned to Marcus's side at the front of the church. Marcus, visibly distressed, turned to address the congregation. "I apologize for the unexpected interruption," he said, his voice strained. "As you know, Lily was very close to her grandmother, and Eleanor's sudden passing has been particularly difficult for her." He glanced at Camilla, who nodded supportively. The priest, looking uncertain, cleared his throat. Shall we proceed?" he asked hesitantly. Marcus looked conflicted, his eyes darting from Lily to Camilla and back again. Doubt had crept into his expression, but the weight of the moment, the eyes of the congregation upon him, seemed to press him into action. Desperate for a return to normalcy, he nodded for the service to continue. As the priest resumed speaking, Lily stood frozen beside Benson, her mind racing. She had spoken out and had taken the first step towards revealing the truth, but it hadn't been enough. The realization that she would need more courage, more evidence, more support to expose Camilla's true nature settled heavily upon her young shoulders. The service continued, but the atmosphere in the church had shifted. Whispers continued to circulate, curious glances were thrown in Lily's direction, and an undercurrent of tension ran through the gathering. Lily remained rooted to her spot beside Benson, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and half-formed plans. The casket was closed with a soft, final thud that seemed to echo through Lily's very being. She watched as Marcus and Camilla took their seats in the front pew, her father's posture rigid with tension, Camilla's hand resting on his arm in a gesture that now seemed more possessive than comforting. The rich, melodious voices of the choir rose in a hymn, filling the church with haunting harmonies. Under normal circumstances, the music might have been soothing, but for Lily, it only served to heighten her sense of isolation and frustration. She had spoken out, had tried to reveal the truth, but her words had been dismissed, brushed aside as the ramblings of a grieving child. Guilt gnawed at her insides. Why hadn't she said more? Why hadn't she been braver, more insistent? The weight of the secrets she carried pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe in the incense-laden air of the church. As the hymn faded and the priest began to speak again, Lily felt a gentle touch on her arm. She looked up to see Benson, the elderly butler who had been a constant, reassuring presence in her life for as long as she could remember. His kind eyes met hers, filled with understanding and a hint of something else. Was it encouragement? "Be strong, child," Benson whispered, his voice barely audible over the priest's words. "Your grandmother's spirit is with you." He paused, glancing towards the front of the church where Marcus and Camilla sat. "You should return to your bench with them whenever you're ready." Lily nodded, grateful for Benson's quiet support. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. With slow, deliberate steps, she made her way back to the family's bench, sliding into the seat next to Camilla. As she sat down, Lily could feel Camilla's eyes on her, cold and calculating, but Lily refused to meet her stepmother's gaze. Instead, she fixed her eyes on the photograph of Eleanor that stood next to the casket, drawing strength from her grandmother's warm smile. In her mind, Lily made a solemn promise. She would expose Camilla's evil, no matter how long it took or how difficult it might be. She wouldn't let another life in her family be claimed by the woman's machinations. The thought of it filled her with a mix of determination and fear. Fear of what Camilla might do if cornered, fear of not being believed, fear of failing her grandmother's memory. The whispers in the congregation had mostly subsided, replaced by the rhythmic cadence of prayers and responses. But Lily could still feel curious glances being thrown her way, and could almost hear the questions forming in people's minds. What had she meant by her outburst? Was there more to Eleanor's death than they had been told? These lingering questions gave Lily a glimmer of hope. Perhaps she had planted a seed of doubt, one that could grow into something more if nurtured carefully. She would need allies, people who would listen to her, believe her, and help her uncover the truth. As the somber notes of the final hymn faded away, the congregation began to stir. The air in the church felt heavy, charged with unspoken tensions and lingering questions. Lily watched as the pallbearers approached the casket, their movements slow and respectful, as they prepared to carry Eleanor's body to its final resting place. The mourners began to file out of the church. The sky had darkened further, threatening rain at any moment. Camilla, ever conscious of appearances, stepped gracefully towards the waiting car, her face a mask of dignified grief. "Come along, Lily," Camilla called, her voice honey-sweet but with an underlying edge of command. She held out her hand expectantly, beckoning Lily to join her in the car. Lily hesitated, her body stiffening at the thought of being trapped in a confined space with Camilla. The memory of her stepmother's threats and manipulations flashed through her mind, making her heart race. Without thinking, she took a step back, shaking her head slightly. Camilla's eyes flashed dangerously, her smile becoming fixed and brittle. In a swift motion, she reached out and grabbed Lily's arm, her manicured nails digging into the girl's skin. "I said come along," she hissed, her voice low enough that only Lily could hear the venom in it. Panic surged through Lily. Acting on instinct, she began to twist and turn, desperately trying to free herself from Camilla's grip. "No," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to. You killed my grandmother." The commotion began to draw attention. Mourners who had been making their way to their own vehicles paused, turning to watch the unfolding scene with curiosity and concern. Whispers began to circulate, and Lily could feel the weight of dozens of eyes upon them. Marcus, who had been speaking with the priest, looked up at the sound of the growing murmurs. His eyes widened as he took in the sight of Lily struggling against Camilla's hold. For a moment he seemed frozen, confusion and alarm warring on his face. Then, as if snapping out of a trance, Marcus strode quickly towards them. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice tight with barely contained emotion. Camilla immediately released her grip on Lily, her face smoothing into an expression of motherly concern. "Oh, it's nothing, darling," she said, her voice saccharine. "Lily's just a bit overwhelmed. I was trying to help her into the car." Lily, rubbing her arm where Camilla's nails had left angry red marks, looked up at her father with pleading eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat, choked by fear and uncertainty. Marcus looked between his daughter and his wife, noting Lily's distress and the growing crowd of onlookers. Making a quick decision, he turned to where Benson stood nearby. "Benson," Marcus called, his voice carrying a note of authority. "Please take Lily in the other car. I think she needs some space right now." Relief washed over Lily's face as Benson stepped forward, offering her a gentle smile. "Of course, sir," the butler said, his kind eyes never leaving Lily's face. "Come along, Miss Lily, let's get you settled." As Benson guided Lily towards the second car, she could feel Camilla's eyes boring into her back. But for the moment, at least, she was safe from her stepmother's clutches. Once they settled into the car, Lily felt some of the tension leave her body. The familiar smell of leather and Benson's aftershave was comforting, a reminder of safer, happier times. The car pulled away from the church, joining the procession of mourners. Lily watched the scenery pass by in a blur of muted colors, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The cemetery loomed in her imagination, a place of finality where she would have to say her last goodbye to her beloved grandmother. As they drove, Benson cleared his throat softly. Lily turned to look at him, noticing a strange mix of emotions on his weathered face: concern, determination, and something that looked almost like guilt. "Miss Lily," Benson began, his voice low and serious, "I know that today has been hard on you, but I want to let you know that I believed in you." Lily looked up. "You did?" Benson nodded. "There's something I need to show you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn, black, leather-bound journal. Lily's eyes widened as she recognized the book. It was her grandmother's journal, the one Eleanor had always kept close, jotting down her thoughts. "Your grandmother knew, child," Benson said, pressing the journal into Lily's hands. "She feared this day might come." With trembling fingers, Lily opened the journal. As she flipped through the pages, her heart raced. There, in her grandmother's familiar handwriting, were detailed notes and observations. Eleanor had documented her suspicions about Camilla's behavior, her manipulations, and even thinly veiled threats. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she read, overwhelmed by the realization that her grandmother had known, had been trying to protect them all along. The journal was filled with love, worry, and a determination to uncover the truth. Why didn't she say anything?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Benson sighed heavily. "She was gathering evidence, Miss Lily. She wanted to be certain before she came forward. And I think she was trying to protect you and your father from the fallout." Lily nodded, understanding dawning. Her grandmother had been fighting a silent battle, one that had ultimately cost her her life. "So why now, and why didn't you give this journal to Father or me earlier?" she wondered. Benson's lined face creased into a frown, his eyes distant as if recalling a conversation from long ago. Because your grandmother would have trusted you to have the strength and wisdom to know what to do with it. She saw in you what many overlook, courage. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. And I could see that too earlier when you spoke up in front of everyone. Lily nodded. Thank you, Benson, for always believing in me. As the cemetery came into view, Lily made a decision. She couldn't keep the journal with her. It was too risky. Camilla might find it, might destroy this crucial evidence. Benson, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. Can you keep this safe for now? I think we're going to need it soon. Benson nodded solemnly, taking the journal and securing it inside his jacket. You can count on me, Miss Lily, he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. As the car came to a stop, Lily took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The journal's revelations burned in her mind, fueling her resolve. She would honor her grandmother's memory and would finish what Eleanor had started. With newfound strength, Lily stepped out of the car, ready to face whatever came next. The truth would come to light, and Camilla would answer for her actions. It was just a matter of time. The procession of black cars wound its way through the iron gates of the cemetery, a somber parade against the backdrop of manicured lawns and weathered headstones. Lily stepped out of the car, the cool air carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and earth. The sky overhead had darkened further, heavy clouds threatening rain, nature itself seeming to mourn alongside the gathered crowd. Mourners began to congregate around the open grave, a sea of black-clad figures standing in respectful silence. Lily's eyes scanned the crowd, noting familiar faces. Family friends, business associates, and distant relatives, all united in their grief for Eleanor. Marcus emerged from his car, his movements stiff and mechanical. He held Camilla's hand loosely, more out of habit than comfort. His eyes, red-rimmed and haunted, sought out Lily. When their gazes met, Lily saw a flicker of something in her father's expression. Confusion, perhaps, or the first stirrings of doubt. Lily stepped forward, Benson a reassuring presence at her side. She could feel the weight of the journal's revelations pressing on her, urging her to speak out, to expose the truth then and there. But caution held her back. This wasn't the moment, not yet. She needed to be smart, to play this carefully if she wanted justice for her grandmother. The priest began the burial service, his words carried on the wind, speaking of eternal rest and the promise of reunion in the hereafter. Lily barely heard him, her mind racing, her heart pounding with the magnitude of what she knew and the burden of what she must do. She glanced at Camilla, studying her stepmother's face. To anyone else, Camilla would appear the picture of grief, her eyes appropriately moist, her expression one of dignified sorrow. But Lily saw beyond the facade now. She noticed the slight upturn at the corner of Camilla's mouth, the calculating gleam in her eyes as she surveyed the gathered mourners. It was the look of someone who thought they had won, who believed their victory was complete and unassailable. The casket was positioned over the open grave, ready to be lowered into the earth. Lily felt a lump form in her throat, the finality of the moment hitting her with full force. This was it, the last time she would be in the presence of her beloved grandmother. As the priest's words washed over the crowd, Lily's gaze drifted to Benson. The elderly butler met her eyes, his expression grave but determined. He tapped his pocket lightly, where the journal was hidden, a silent reminder of the truth they now shared, of the battle that lay ahead. Lily squared her shoulders, drawing strength from the knowledge that she wasn't alone in this fight. Her grandmother had known the truth, had documented it. Benson believed her and stood ready to help. And somewhere deep inside, Lily sensed that her father too might be ready to see the truth, if only she could find a way to show him. The first drops of rain began to fall as the casket was prepared for its final descent. Lily watched, her heart aching, as the polished wood that held her grandmother's earthly remains began to sink into the ground. With each inch it lowered, Lily felt her resolve strengthen. She would not let this be the end. She would not allow Camilla's lies and manipulations to be Eleanor's legacy. The truth would come out, no matter the cost. As the priest's words washed over the gathering, something stirred inside Lily. The weight of everything she knew, everything she had endured, and everything her grandmother had suffered, became too much to bear in silence. "Stop!" Lily's voice rang out clear and strong, cutting through the rain and the murmured prayers. The crowd froze, eyes wide with shock as they turned to stare at the young girl who dared to interrupt the sacred moment. Marcus whirled around, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he took in his daughter's determined stance. "Lily, what?" But Lily wasn't finished. Her eyes locked onto Camilla, who had already begun to move towards her, a look of practiced concern on her face. "Stop pretending," Lily said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Stop acting like you care, like you're mourning. You're not fooling anyone anymore." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Murmurs began to ripple through the gathering, and Lily noticed several people pulling out their phones, beginning to record the unfolding drama. Rather than feeling exposed, Lily felt emboldened. The more witnesses, the better. Camilla reached Lily, attempting to put an arm around her shoulders. "Darling, you're upset. This isn't the time or place for—" Lily shrugged off Camilla's touch, taking a step back. "No," she said firmly. "I won't be silent anymore. I have to tell everyone what really happened the night grandmother died." The crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath. Marcus stepped forward, his face pale, his eyes darting between his daughter and his wife. "Lily, what are you talking about?" Drawing a deep breath, Lily began to speak, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It was late at night. Dad was on a business trip and everyone had gone to bed. The house was dark, but I woke up to the sound of voices in the hallway." Lily's voice faltered for a moment as she relived the memory, but she gripped it tightly, forcing herself to continue. "I peeked out and saw Camilla with a man dressed like a doctor. But he wasn't grandmother's doctor. Her doctor was a woman." The crowd listened in stunned silence as Lily recounted how she had followed Camilla and the unknown man, keeping to the shadows. "I watched as they entered grandmother's room, but before that, I followed them. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor where grandmother's room was. I didn't want them to see me, so I took the stairs, keeping to the shadows." She paused, looking at the faces around her, some pale with shock. "When I reached the 3rd floor, I saw them enter grandmother's room. I couldn't see everything, but I heard noises, thumps, something breaking, and then I heard grandmother asking for help." Lily's voice cracked as she fought back tears. The door opened and Camilla and the man came out. They didn't shut it all the way, so I could see her lying there, having a seizure, with a bruise on her head. The young girl's voice grew stronger as she continued. "I wanted to call for Benson, but before I could move, I realized Camilla and the man were coming my way. This time, they took the stairs, and they saw me." A ripple of horror moved through the crowd. Marcus stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning comprehension. Lily's eyes flickered to Camilla, who now stood rigid, her carefully constructed mask beginning to slip. "I ran back to my room as fast as I could, but Camilla caught up. The man grabbed me and injected me with something. I felt it, cold and sharp. Before I blacked out, Camilla leaned in and whispered, 'If you say anything, you'll lose more than your grandmother.'" As Lily finished her account, a heavy silence fell over the cemetery. The only sound was the steady fall of rain and the occasional click of a camera phone. All eyes were on Camilla, whose composure had completely crumbled, her face a mixture of rage and fear. Marcus, his voice shaking, broke the silence. "Camilla, is this true?" "No, of course not. This is madness. I love Eleanor, you know that. I have always loved her." Camilla denied, but her eyes darted around wildly like a cornered animal. The rain fell harder as Camilla's denial hung in the air, and a wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. The steady patter of rain seemed to fade into the background as the gathered mourners processed the gravity of what they had just heard. Faces shifted from disbelief to horrified understanding. The once solemn funeral had transformed into a scene of chaos and confusion. Some people stood frozen in shock, while others began to whisper urgently to one another. their eyes darting between Lily, Camilla, and Marcus. Marcus, his face a mask of anguish and dawning comprehension, stepped towards Lily. His eyes searched his daughter's face. The internal struggle was evident in every line of his body as he grappled with the implications of Lily's accusation. "Bring the casket back up," Marcus commanded, his voice trembling yet resolute. The pallbearers, who had been standing by uncertainly, looked at each other in confusion before moving to comply. The priest, clearly out of his depth in this unprecedented situation, watched in stunned silence as the casket, which had begun its descent, was carefully raised and placed back on the ground. The crowd parted as Marcus approached the casket, his steps heavy with the weight of what he was about to do. He hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the lid, before taking a deep breath and gently lifting it. Eleanor's serene face came into view, the mortician's work impeccable in its artistry, covering any sign of disturbance. Marcus leaned in, his eyes focusing intently on Eleanor's temple. With trembling fingers, he began to gently brush away the layer of expertly applied makeup, now showered with drops of rain. A collective gasp arose from the onlookers as a dark, unmistakable bruise became visible on Eleanor's temple. Stepping back, Marcus's eyes filled with anguish as the reality sank in with brutal force. His voice, thick with pain and barely controlled rage, rang out, "What have you done, Camilla?" All eyes turned to Camilla, who stood rigid, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of the evidence before her. For a moment, she seemed to shrink under the collective gaze of the mourners, many of whom were now recording the unfolding drama on their phones. Camilla, in a last desperate attempt to salvage the situation, tried to hold her composure. "I don't know what she's talking about," she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. Marcus's gaze sharpened, turning cold and determined as he faced his wife. He stepped away from the casket and towards Camilla, his voice steely and unyielding. "Tell me everything now," he demanded. Camilla's eyes darted around wildly, searching for an escape. "You have no evidence," she spat, her voice a mixture of desperation and defiance. "It's just the word of a grieving child against mine." It was at this moment that Lily spoke up again, her voice stronger now. "We have proof," she said, her chin lifted in determination. "Grandmother's journal. She wrote down everything she observed about you, Camilla. All your manipulations, your cold behavior, your threats." Lily signaled to Benson, who stepped forward, the leather-bound journal clutched protectively against his chest. The elderly butler's face was a mix of sorrow and resolve as he handed the journal to Marcus. As Marcus began to flip through the pages, reading Eleanor's detailed accounts of her suspicions and fears, the gravity of the situation seemed to settle over the gathering like a heavy shroud. The rain, which had slowed to a drizzle, created a somber backdrop to the unfolding drama. He turned to a specific page and began to read aloud, his voice shaking with emotion. March 15th. Camilla's behavior towards me grows colder by the day. I fear she never truly loved our family, that this has all been about money and status. This morning, just after Marcus left to his office, I saw her rummaging through his desk. What is she looking for? A collective murmur rose from the crowd. Many had suspected Camilla's true nature, but to hear it confirmed in Eleanor's own words was shocking. Marcus continued reading, his voice growing stronger with each damning entry. April 3rd. After our argument at dinner about my health, Camilla cornered me again, warning me to stay out of her business. Her eyes, they were so cold, so threatening. I fear for Lily. I must find a way to protect her and Marcus. Marcus looked up from the journal, his gaze locking onto Camilla. The woman who had shared his bed, his home, his life for the past 8 years, suddenly seemed like a stranger. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did you marry me for wealth and status? Did you hurt my mother?" The crowd held its breath, all eyes on Camilla. For a moment she stood frozen, her mask of innocence cracking under the weight of the evidence against her. Then something in her seemed to snap. A derisive laugh escaped her lips, startling in its bitterness. "Yes," Camilla spat, her composure crumbling entirely. "Yes, I married you for your wealth and status. Your mother was a meddling old woman who poisoned your mind against me, always telling you to remove me from the will." Her voice rose, hysteria creeping in at the edges. "I took care of this family for 8 years. 8 years. I should be part of that will, and you should be grateful for what I sacrificed." Marcus's face crumpled as the full weight of the betrayal hit him. His hands shook as he closed the journal, looking up at Camilla with a mixture of heartbreak and revulsion. "You lied to me," he said, his voice breaking. "You lied to all of us. You killed my mother." "You were blind, Marcus." Her expression twisted in anger and rage. Her designer dress, chosen so carefully for the funeral, was now wet, wrinkled, and askew. "Your precious mother was always against me. She never gave me a chance. All those years of watching, judging, whispering in your ear." Her voice cracked with hatred and desperation. "She even turned the staff against me, didn't you, Benson?" She shot a hateful glare at the butler. Always watching, always reporting back to her. The loyal family servant. Benson's face remained impassive, though his eyes held a deep sadness. He had served the Caldwells for over 2 decades, had watched Lily grow up, and had been Eleanor's confidant in her final months. "I serve truth and justice, madam," he said quietly, "as Mrs. Eleanor taught us all to do." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some openly filming with their phones now. Embarrassment and desperation flashed across Camilla's face as she realized she was trapped. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for any means of escape. She backed away a few steps and then fled the scene, searching for gaps in between the crowd. Benson dialed through his intercom and 2 of the family's guards who stood at the gate of the cemetery. They gathered and rushed to block Camilla's path. Marcus, his face a storm of emotions, raised his phone with a shaking hand. "I'm calling the police," he announced, his voice carrying clearly over the hushed whispers of the crowd. This ends now." As Marcus dialed, Lily stepped closer to her father, reaching out to take his free hand. He squeezed it tightly, drawing strength from his daughter's presence. Benson moved to stand protectively near them, his eyes never leaving Camilla. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the air, growing louder with each passing moment. Camilla, realizing the finality of her situation, seemed to deflate, all fight leaving her body. She stood, surrounded by the guards, her eyes vacant as she stared at the open grave that had been meant for Eleanor. As the police car pulled up to the cemetery gates, its lights flashing, a sense of grim resolution settled over the gathering. Marcus, still clutching Eleanor's journal, approached the lead officer. His voice was steady despite the turmoil evident in his eyes. "Officer, I need to report a crime," he said, glancing back at Camilla, who stood rigid and pale, flanked by the family's security guards. As Marcus began to recount the events that had unfolded, providing the journal as evidence and explaining Lily's testimony, the officer nodded gravely. He turned to his colleagues, issuing quiet orders. 2 officers moved towards Camilla, their faces impassive as they began to secure her hands behind her back. Camilla, seeming to snap out of her shocked state, suddenly lashed out. "You'll regret this," she screamed, her voice shrill and filled with venom. Her eyes, wild with fury and fear, locked onto Marcus and Lily. "I gave you everything. You're nothing without me." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Camilla was led away, her outburst captured on dozens of phone cameras. The once poised and elegant woman now looked disheveled and unhinged, a far cry from the carefully crafted image she had maintained for so long. As Camilla was placed in the back of a police car, the lead officer turned back to Marcus and Lily. "We'll need to take Mrs. Caldwell's body back to the hospital for further examination," he said, his tone professional but sympathetic. "And we'll need to take your statements. The journal will be logged as key evidence in the case." Marcus nodded, his face a mixture of grief and determination. "Of course, officer. Whatever you need." Benson stepped forward, clearing his throat softly. "Sir," he said, addressing Marcus, "I've taken the liberty of contacting the family lawyer. He's on his way and should be here shortly." Marcus gave the elderly butler a grateful look, reaching out to squeeze his shoulder. "Thank you, Benson, for everything." As the officers began to coordinate the removal of Eleanor's body and the gathering of witness statements, Marcus turned to Lily. His eyes, brimming with tears, met hers. "Lily," he said, his voice cracking, "I'm so sorry I failed to protect you and your grandmother. I believed her lies and I can't take that back, but I promise you, from now on, I will listen. I will be here." Lily, her own tears flowing freely now, stepped into her father's embrace. They clung to each other, sharing in their grief and the weight of all that had happened. It was a moment of reconnection, of healing beginning to take root amidst the chaos and pain. Benson stood nearby, a reassuring presence in the storm of emotions and activity. "Eleanor would be proud of you both," he said softly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. As the ambulance arrived to take Eleanor's body, and the crowd began to disperse, murmuring in hushed voices about the shocking turn of events, Marcus, Lily, and Benson made their way to the family car. They were physically and emotionally exhausted, but there was a sense of unity between them that hadn't existed before. Inside the car, Marcus held Lily's hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We have a lot to face together," he said, his voice tired but resolute, "but we'll get through this." Lily nodded, clutching Eleanor's journal close to her heart. As they drove away from the cemetery, leaving behind a place marked by betrayal and sorrow, Lily felt a mix of emotions washing over her. There was grief, yes, and fear of the uncertain future. But there was also a glimmer of hope, a sense that they were moving towards something better, something truer. As the car wound its way through the quiet streets, Lily's eyes shone with a mixture of sadness and determination. She leaned her head against the cool window, watching the world pass by in a blur. In her mind, she whispered a promise to her grandmother, to herself, and to the future they would now build together. "We'll be okay, grandmother. We'll make things right." The car continued on, carrying a family forever changed, but united in their resolve to honor Eleanor's memory and to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together.